Okay. Let me where did I stop? As he explained. Yes, that's the place. Okay, let me share the screen. Yeah. Here. Okay, let's begin. As he explained, if people would happily accept the truth, there would be no need to reprove them. There would be no need to chastise them. So it is not that you are simply an angry person. There is something called an angry person. Just as there is a lusty person, there is a greedy person, there is an angry person. A lusty person, he develops his lust whenever about anything, a person, whatever. A greedy person, as soon as he sees money, he wants it. An angry person, as soon as he gets an opportunity, he wants to shout, scream. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was, or any of the perfect acharyas, they're not like that. There has to be a reason which would displeasingly force him to take up this service of chastising. This is a very displeasing service. It is not a service that any bona fide Vaishnava would happily want. It is, like Prabhupada himself says, Krishna orders the pure devotee to speak like this, to chastise, and therefore he does. This chastisement was in the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudha eva Kutumbakam. The entire earth is my family. Seeing everyone in the world as dear, for he cared so deeply for all that he could not bear to see others misled or misleading. He spoke caustically, acidically, only to benefit persons whose perverse attitudes could not otherwise be altered, and to protect the sincere from being cheated. He clarified that although his approach might seem pugnacious, quarrelsome, he was compelled to speak thus to avoid harming others. For the worst type of violence is to refrain from delivering Harikatha, pure Harikatha. I myself have seen, I remember a few years back, I was in Sri Rangam, in Sri Ranganath's temple, large temple complex, and there's an area where there is sand, just plain sand. You can walk in the sand. So I saw one small child playing with the sand and taking the sand in the palm, and then the child wanted to put it into the mouth. But just before that, the child's elder sister came and suddenly made a face and he shouted in some very terrible manner. So the child out of fear threw away that. So it is something like that, out of, there's no other way what to do. If that elder sister, who was maybe 6 years old or something, if she didn't do that, then the small child would have put sand into the mouth, which would have led to much larger complications. He explained that Jiva himself, violence to or envy of jivas, included not only the conventional definition of killing, disturbing, or causing trouble to all categories of jiva, but more importantly consisting of apathy, indifference, or miserliness toward preaching Shuddha Bhakti, or in encouraging Mayavadis, Karmis, or Anyabhilashis. Anyabhilashi. It's an expression Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur often uses. Anyabhilashita. He refers this to not just the state of desiring something other than pure devotional service, but also durniti, immorality, adharmic, basic adharma. Anyabhilashi refers to people who are adharmic, people who accept karma kanda strictly. These are the karmis. They accept karma dharma. Then you have the jnanis who accept jnana dharma, the yogis who accept yoga dharma, and the bhaktas who accept bhakti dharma. All of this is within the big circle of Vedic dharma. Anything outside of that is adharma. And anyabhilashis are these. Those who are interested in adharma. Those who want happiness in this life, these are adharmic people. Or in encouraging mayavadis, karmis, or anyabhilashis, or speaking in a manner sympathetic to and accommodating of their outlook. So all of this is Jiva Himsa. It's like if somebody tries to molest a girl in your presence and you just don't do anything about it. You're also held to be abetting in the crime, at least from the moral point of view. Or if your friends make a plan to do something like that and you're sympathetic to them, yeah, what to do, you're suffering, you need to relieve yourself. That's another, he's also a criminal. Or to even accommodate these ideas as being valid ideas, that is also a crime. Similarly, anything which is not beneficial, short term or long term, is simply bad for us. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as a representative of Rupa Goswami, as a representative of Radharani, actually, is so sharp in this. Hence, he exhorted his listeners. He called out to his listeners to patiently hear his message, notwithstanding any discomfort experienced in so doing. Let us cast off the challenging temper. Let us get rid of the challenging attitude. Submissively offer our ear and hear what the messenger says. We will clear up doubts by interrogatories, by asking questions. The messenger should not be regarded as our flatterer. The messenger's business is not to flatter us. The messenger's business is not to try to make us happy. A number of people were frustrated in material life, become attracted to spirituality without even knowing what is proper and what is improper. These people generally become easily victimized by flatterers because they are completely narcissistic. They're obsessed with I, me, mine. Not in the materialistic sense, like those who think that I should enjoy my senses, or those who think that I should earn a lot. These people, they are frustrated with that. But they still have a subtle, strong sense of self-obsession. So to such an extent, they think that a person is considered to be a good saint or a bad saint based on how he deals with me. So I am the great criteria by which the world should understand who is a good saint and who is a bad saint. Because this good saint, he has hurt me. And how exactly did he hurt you? Well, he spoke something which I didn't very much like. So he hurt me. And therefore, he cannot be a serious saint. They don't consider to what degree he has become detached from this world. Shantira vyartha kalatvam viraktir manashunyata ashavanda samutkantha namagani sadaruchi asaktisthad gunakhyane pritistad vasatistale. These are the invariable symptoms of one who has attained internal direct experience of God. These are all externally verifiable symptoms, and they cannot be faked, nor can they be even hidden by a God experiencer. This is a science. It is a science of devotional service. Bhakti Yoga is presented as a science by Srila Rupa Goswami. So people who are in the Artha Jigyasu Artharthi category, they typically don't have the intelligence to understand this, and therefore they simply consider those who don't flatter them to be mysteriously cruel saints. They are also themselves puzzled. What is this man? He's so austere and he is kind to some people. He is happy with some people. He's unhappy with some people. He is very, very much caring. But at the same time, he's so harsh and so mysterious. Not such a great mystery. It is not such a great mystery. If we look through the Bhakti Shastras, if you become Bhakti Shastra Chakshu, then you will not have a difficulty. You will not find it difficult. He will speak in the most insolent way. My internet is terrible. Yes. Give me a minute.
I'll give you
hotspot. No, I think I'm already on hotspot. Yeah, I'm already on hotspot. Okay, just give me a minute. Let me open Merriam-Webster. Okay. And I will keep it here. Okay, got it. Insolent, insultingly contemptuous in speech or conduct. So that's insolent. By bitter words, he will undeceive us. Wow, what a word. Undeceive us. I've heard of another expression called unconfuse. Unconfuse. I haven't seen it in this book, but I read it somewhere on the internet. One Christian priest was telling some other Christian congregation who were confused about a particular method of propaganda, particular method of preaching. He said, since you're also confused, let me unconfuse you by explaining the actual thing. So you can understand that definitely a person who's eager to communicate the truth that will help us will unconfuse us also. If we have any hankering for the truth, we should submit and hear. The first duty of the messenger of the Absolute is to cut off our wrong impressions, to change our taste. It is an unpalatable duty, but we shall make progress by his regulation. You should be prepared for bitter words for the undoing of whatever you have learned. It's a bit like when someone goes and joins the military. Then he's trained in ways that seem very harsh. All kinds of things that people in the military are being put through. Same way. In Vrindavan, end of quote. In Vrindavan in 1932, a certain gentleman posited to Srila Saraswati Thakur, gave his opinion. Propose as an explanation to Srila Saraswati Thakur. You have numerous respectable and educated followers and many first-class properties, and thus have acquired facilities to work with. I have not. So before speaking the truth, I'll have to gain much more momentum. Srila Saraswati Thakur responded, unless one is fixed in the truth, he cannot fearlessly present the truth. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati advised his disciples to see the opposition they were sure to face as being God's arrangement, and to develop the tolerance essential for preachers of Harikatha. Harikatha, the message of Lord Hari. When Bhagavan is merciful to me, he arranges unlimited persons to speak sour words in uncountable ways, simply to teach me tolerance. One who cannot learn to tolerate the cavils of the world is ineligible to chant Harinam. This is presented as a verb. Trivial, frivolous objection. He exhorted his disciples to follow the example of Sri Radha. Incited by argument or advice. his disciples to follow the example of Sri Radharani in not giving up service to Krishna despite inviting public scorn by such adamancy. And he put in perspective the difficulty and thanklessness of his task. Millions of materially motivated speakers will go to hell, but someday someone will realize the independent truth spoken forthrightly and be saved. It may take hundreds of lives or millions of years before someone will be able to comprehend this confidential reality. It is not possible to make even one individual do so without spending hundreds of gallons of blood. Hard work. Pure practice itself is quite a challenge. Then on top of it, to communicate it purely without distortion, without any ambiguity, is certainly hard work. We tell everyone, you understand little. Thus, we have gained numerous enemies and friends when one contradicts those conceptions opposed to bhakti, namely karma, jnana, and anyabhilash, and establishes bhakti siddhanta. It becomes necessary to buck the current thoughts of the world concerned with the body and mind. It becomes necessary to oppose that current. It becomes necessary to stop it. There is no other way. You cannot continue like that, to charge against something, to oppose the current thoughts. Our duty is not to become friends with the world. Our duty is to oppose the thoughts of the world by which the world is inflicting its own shoka, moha, bhaya. Shoka, moha, bhaya. Three features of material existence. And the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam remove these three, shoka, moha, bhayapaha. So if we carefully analyze anyabhilashita, karma, and jnana, all three, to different degrees, they simply increase our shoka, moha, bhaya. They don't reduce and free us from them. As the saying goes, a dumb person has no enemies. If one simply sits in one's house silently thinking of one's own welfare, there will certainly be nothing of import, nothing of significance to tell the world. But we cannot tolerate that people who have achieved the rare human birth, a birth suitable for worshipping the Lord, simply walk by the path of misfortune, of non-devotion, abhakti, non-devotion. We are obliged to repeatedly call others to topics of devotion. I will die soon, after which no one will come to prevent you from your enjoyment. At that time, you will be able to enjoy to your heart's content in rejecting sense indulgence and instead talking of satisfying Krishna's senses. I have become a source of disgruntlement for many. I have become a source of irritation for many. Many people have become disgruntled. They have become dissatisfied. I just found today a nice quote. This very nice, typical of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. I'm very surprised to find Prabhupada use the very same expressions that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati uses. Our natural position is to provide enjoyment for Krishna. In the spiritual world, for example, Krishna enjoys, and the gopis, the transcendental cowherd girls, supply the ingredients for Krishna's enjoyment. These are all typical expressions used by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Supply the ingredients for Krishna's enjoyment. This is bhakti. In other words, just like you cook and you provide it for somebody else to be happy. Like that, you supply the ingredients for Krishna's enjoyment. This is bhakti from teachings of Vidvan. So that is what is meant by satisfying Krishna's senses. They have not missed a chance to attempt to kill me. Some of them think he's scuttled our court case. He somehow or other managed to escape. Cut a hole through the bottom. to destroy, to wreck. Others give the opinion. Our position has become diminished. We cannot help becoming the butt of dislike, the object of dislike for people absorbed in greed, egoism, prestige, and duplicity. If Krishna protects a person, no one can do anything to him. May the actual truth prevail. End of quote. Srila Saraswati Thakur perfectly manifested the mood of Sri Prahlad Maharaj, the archetypal preacher, the prototype preacher, the original preacher, who had said, Naivod Vijay Paraduratyaya Vaitaranyas Padvirya Gayana Mahamrita Magna Chittaha Choche Tato Vimukha Chetasa Indriyarthamaya Sukhaya Bharamudbhato Vimudhan. O best of great personalities, I am not at all afraid of material existence. For whatever I say, for wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. My only anxiety is for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for mundane happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I am simply concerned with love for them. Vimukti kama maunam charanti vijanena parartha nishtha naitan vihaya kripana vimuksha eko nanyam padasya sharanam ramato nupashye. Most saintly persons desiring their own deliverance go to the hills or forests to meditate with vows of silence. They are not interested in delivering others. But I do not wish to be liberated alone, leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals. I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter at your lotus feet, one cannot be happy. Therefore, I wish to bring them back to the shelter of your lotus feet. To Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's disciples, several individuals proffered, presented, suggested what they considered well-intentioned suggestions for improving his performance if he would just be a little more sensitive to public opinion and more positive in his outlook. And we hear a lot about these things nowadays. Don't be judgmental. Be sensitive. Be positive. If he would look for the good in others and not grouse so much, not complaining all the time. About everything we do, it is wrong. Isn't there anything which will make you happy? Everything we say, you have a complaint. So, like this, not complain so much and not be so insistent on always speaking the straight facts. Then surely today no other religious leader would have as many supporters as he. If he did not forbid all kinds of intoxicants, then right now thousands would surrender to him. He could have been tremendously successful by adjusting to smarta practices and not introducing new ideas about Brahmanism. If he had at least orally endorsed, approved of groups that he instead chose to berate, that he chose to chastise, the gurus thereof and their unlimited followers would have submitted to him as their universal head, the Mahaguru. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was not interested in these things. He was only interested in presenting the truth that would benefit others. Another common tactic of opponents unable to digest the raw truth presented by Srila Saraswati Thakur was to take exception with his mode of delivery, thus dodging discussion of his actual message. So that problem is, but the way you said it, why did you say like that? Why did you say like that? That's not the point. 2 + 2 is 4. That needs to be communicated. Whichever way you communicate it, if it is going to benefit you, then it's fine. If it's not going to benefit you, then it's fine. Then your criticism might be valid. But if it is going to benefit you, then it is certainly more important than how it has been presented. But Srila Saraswati Thakur was not inveigled. Could not be won over by such deceptive methods. by the apparent pragmatism of such self-serving cant of this group of people who simply want to be happy with whatever they are thinking. Now, there are people who are happy with whatever they're thinking and who never want to be disturbed about it. They really don't want you to come and give scriptural evidence, logic, and all these things because it disturbs us. Whatever we are thinking, allow us to think whatever we are thinking. Just let us be happy. You be happy, I be happy. There are thousands and millions of people like this on this planet. So when they give advice, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, you would not take it very seriously. He knew that while among themselves such persons proclaimed loathing for everything he stood for, they feared to voice their opinions in the presence of even his junior disciples, lest they be philosophically demolished and exposed as the scapegraces they were. These people never took him seriously, and therefore he didn't take their advices, their criticisms seriously. They were scapegraces. They were incorrigible rascals, straight from Merriam-Webster's. So rather than reconcile with those whose real intent was to continue with undisturbed sense enjoyment, he went on speaking the truth in a manner virtually guaranteed to invoke enmity, thus inviting upon himself untold troubles and inconveniences. Often, as soon as he nullified one argument, his opponents would fabricate another, calling on seemingly unending reserves of warped, twisted, imaginative intelligence for weaving convoluted theories, highly speculative theories. Yet as a committed soldier, Srila Saraswati Thakur was not only bold but also unyielding. He would never given. Remaining firm and equipoised on the battlefield, he shattered with the weapons of Shastriya knowledge, scriptural knowledge, insight, and conviction the barrage of verbal missiles ever fired at him. This is a war, ideological war. It is a non-violent ideological war. There is something like that. Happens all over the world. There is a war of propaganda. Happens all over the world. Don't believe it? Open your news channel and have a look. You'll find one group saying one thing, another group saying the exact opposite, and they're all giving evidences and this and that. And it is an ideological war. The same way, reaching Krishna consciousness is an ideological war. Non-violent ideological war. Despite the Gaudiya Math's multi-pronged, ingenious, sedulous, and widely acclaimed preaching campaign, relatively few were serious enough to wholeheartedly accept its teachings and the genuine devotional path. So it was multi-pronged. It was ingenious. Having or showing an unusual aptitude for discovering, inventing, or contriving, marked by originality, resourcefulness, and cleverness in conception or execution. So the Gaudiya Math's preaching campaign was like this. It was also sedulous. It was accomplished with careful perseverance, diligent, in a very diligent manner. And it was widely acclaimed. Relatively few were seriously surrendering to his teachings. Here is a quote. The Gaudiya Math has been advertising its aims and objects and its methods in the most unambiguous manner. That is, by the words and deeds of all the inmates of its numerous branches and its wandering preachers. But in spite of its vigorous propagandist endeavors, the general public is hardly correctly informed of its character. The unique nature of its purpose and method has necessarily raised up a numerous body of opponents who believe in intellectual and humanitarian activities. Necessarily raised up. when you when you have this as your purpose, and you have a particular method, first of all, the purpose is to spread nothing less than pure devotion service unto the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Radha Krishna. Nothing less than that. So the purpose itself is very lofty. Then on top of it, the method that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur brings in was previously exhibited by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his writings. Everything other than pure devotion service unto Krishna is simply wrong to different degrees, that's all. Either it is ordinarily wrong or it's extremely wrong. It is simply wrong. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, starts propagating it in 1,000 different ways. So it necessarily brings up opposition. Opposition from whom? From those who believe in intellectual and humanitarian activities. It has been vehemently condemned by the orthodox sections of the Hindus. It has been supposed to be dogmatic, reactionary, and uncultured. The intellectual sections have kept aloof from it in sheer despair and in almost open contempt. The average so-called religious person feels scandalized by the open deprecation of all good work. People are suffering. You're opening hospitals. You're feeding the poor. And you're saying this is nonsense? Are you out of your heads? And you want me to sympathize with you? The average so-called person thinks like this. He feels that if he becomes party to this, he will also be part of the scandal. These are people who don't even appreciate opening orphanages. Everybody is persuaded that an institution which goes against the opinion of the generality of mankind is automatically proved to be wrong and absurd. The whole world is going in this way, and you're going the opposite way. So the very fact that that itself is proof that you're wrong and you're absurd. It is this inert self-complacency that has perverted most persons from lending their serious attention to the preachers of the Matha. It is this self-complacent, this idea that I'm fine, we're all fine, and we need to do nothing about it. It is this attitude that has made these people so perverted that they are unable to even check what these preachers are saying. They have seemed to hear its message only out of their condescending courtesy, out of extreme sympathy towards you. They think showing or characterized by a patronizing or superior attitude towards them. Out of sympathy, out of courtesy, I will at least let you speak in my presence. Because you are such a fool that you don't even understand how foolish you are, I will allow you to speak what you want to speak, take some dakshina and get lost. They have not listened to the message as to a matter of immediate practical importance. They have not felt the necessity of lending their really serious attention. It appears to me that Madhvacharya also had to go through an experience of this type. This came in the 24th December 1936 edition of the Harmonist. That means the final edition looks like. Yet Srila Saraswati Thakur exhorted his followers not to be discouraged. Quote, the truth is always the truth, the genuine always genuine. Ordinary people may or may not accept it, but it never loses its glory or respectable position. Maybe it will happen that within many eons, many yugas, only one sincere truth-seeking person will appreciate the genuineness of the Gaudiya Math. Yet such a person could affect auspiciousness for unlimited millions of people. End of quote. And those who did allow Bhaktisiddhanta Vani to enter their heart, surrendering their life for its propagation, became so surcharged with transcendental energy, that each man performed the work of many. Thus, the voice of the Gaudiya Math was heard far and wide, making a significant and lasting impression on the cultural, religious, and philosophical life of Bengal and beyond. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati untiringly strove to transmit Shuddha Bhakti to as many as possible. Yet his aim was not so much to collect numerous followers as to find but a single sincere person. He would often declare, even at the expense of all these properties, temples, and mathas, if I could assist even one soul in becoming a pure devotee, my mission would be fulfilled. So, if one person did not have very high expectations, if one person can attain the perfection of pure devotion service, prema bhakti, he felt that was enough. Not enough, but satisfactory. The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati vowed, he took it as a vow that even if the whole world were against him, or if not a single individual were to stay with him, or if those who had made a pretense of surrendering to him were to leave, still under the protection of his Gurudev's lotus feet, he would fearlessly and unceasingly preach the unadulterated truth until the last moment he remained in this world. And if someday that truth were to enter the ear of even one fortunate soul, then through that lone person, the entire universe would attain the topmost benefit. Citing the stanza, Koti Mukta Madhya Durlabh Ek Krishna Bhakta, even among millions of liberated persons, even one devotee of Lord Krishna is a rare. He commented, considering that liberated persons are very rare, then what to speak of authentic Vaishnavas? So if as a result of our activities, 5 pure devotees were to emerge from among the 50 million people of Bengal, we would deem that an unexpectedly great success. So this is just 1 in a million. When asked disparagingly, how many people know of Vaishnava Dharma? When he was critically asked, the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati responded, how many postgraduates are being turned out? How many Newtons have been there? Is it a wise principle to give up the culture of science because there are not many Professor J.C. Boses, Jagadish Chandra Bose? These are all big scientists. Newton, considered a genius of his time. Do we stop scientific research just because we don't produce geniuses on the level of Isaac Newton? We don't. Like that, the activity of culturing and distributing the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu involving pure devotion service to Lord Krishna, that should always continue, knowing very well that very few would be ready to fully surrender to Lord Krishna to the extent that he wants in order to attain the highest perfection of life. A headmaster once petitioned Srila Saraswati Thakur, "You are speaking of very high matters, but we are now in a nightmarish state. Giving up fish and flesh is too hard for us. We are conditioned souls. Please give us an easy process." Srila Saraswati Thakur replied, "You are fallen in the well. I should not go down. You should come up to me. Don't try to pull me down. Stretch out your hand and I will pull you up. Don't try to make it too easy. We cannot give up our essential practices and allow eating of fish and flesh." Such words indicated the implicit tenor, the implicit mood of Srila Saraswati Thakur's message and mission, to set exemplary standards and uplift others so that they could derive actual benefit, not to become co-opted by humdrum religiosity, bogus religiosity of no real value for anyone. It's not our duty to dilute our principles. It is our duty to help others come up to the highest standard. Srila Ramanujacharya often spoke about creating a staircase to Vaikuntha, by which he meant you have to give people a step-by-step process by which they can go up without going down. You tell them to just jump up, they will not be able to do it. So you have to give a step-by-step process. And that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur could provided a method. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati never blenched at pointing out deviations from Shastra and Siddhanta. Blench, to draw back or turn aside from a lack of courage. He was never frightened of this. During the Gaudmandal Parikrama in 1925, while visiting the birthplace of Ishwarapuri in Kumarahatta, in a speech to his accompanying disciples, he specified the discrepancies within the temple there. The deity form of Ishwarapuri depicted him as an old man dressed in the white cloth of a grihastha. Before him was a deity of Nimai Pandit in a pose beseeching his mercy. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explained that at the time of awarding initiation to Sri Chaitanya, Ishwarapuri was a sannyasi. And since he had not remained long in this world, it was inaccurate to portray him as aged. Besides, although Ishwarapuri had formally initiated Nimai Pandit, actually his mood was ever that of a servant to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So to represent him as if the Lord's master was certainly, as if he were the Lord's master, was certainly against the intent of Shastra. Moreover, the imaginative writings inscribed in the temple and that the puja was conducted with bay leaves and red hibiscus, standard offerings to Lord Shiva, further indicated the worshipper's ignorance. Aggressive as he was toward all forms of hypocrisy, Srila Saraswati Thakur sometimes recommended a tactful approach, such as suggesting gradual treatment of persons afflicted with the malice of material life by dispensing homeopathic doses in sugar-coated pills, and that better than directly naming popular bogus missions or individuals was to expose the defects in their teachings and thus defeat them indirectly. So even though he was very aggressive, sometimes he recommended that we use tactful method. One way is a little bit every now and then. A little bit every now and then. Like homeopathic doses in sugar-coated pills. Little, homeopathic pills are very small. You eat a lot, but the pill is only this small. So you talk a lot about Krishna consciousness, a little bit. Just one little punch. That's enough. And again, you continue. Again, give a little punch. So this one way that he did approve of, provided you can produce results. But it is gradual. Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself was like this. To immediately identify rascals as such would cause others who are sentimentally attached to them to take umbrage and be unable to hear the intended message. Umbrage, a feeling of pique or resentment, and some often fancied slight or insult. Attacking on a personal level would unnecessarily engender acrimonious vendettas. Simply bring about all kinds of sharp personal quarrels filled with revenges, counter revenges, and it just goes on and on and on. Just dragging matters to a petty level and thus sidelining philosophical understanding. Thus, Srila Saraswati Thakur sometimes advised his disciples, don't say cow, but rather an animal with 4 legs, a tail, and 2 horns that gives milk. So you don't identify such and such a person as such, but you talk about all the different features of his ideology. You point out this is what is wrong. But in the company of his followers, that was in public. But in the company of his followers, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati unreservedly fulminated against charlatans and cheaters and the missions built around them. He uttered with denunciation. He criticized charlatans, cheaters. Charlatan is more than a cheater. Quack. One making usually showy pretenses to knowledge or ability, a fraud. Bengalis were proud of their various celebrities in science, politics, philosophy, and religion, yet on the strength of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati dismissed them all as fools. No. Wait, let me get back. Gone far away. There we go. And often the publications of the Gaudium are named and openly criticize certain celebrities. For instance, the September 1929 Harmonist targeted both maverick philosopher J. Krishnamurti and Nobel Prize winner Rabindranath Tagore, the most famous and revered poet of Bengal, for their vague speculative approaches to spiritual life, the former outright discarding and the latter politely dodging Shrautapantha. J. Krishnamurti didn't follow any parampara. Rabindranath Tagore, very politely, he dodged the parampara authority structure. Yet Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not simply criticize or call ill names or lash out whimsically or boorishly. He didn't simply throw criticisms at them whenever he was in a bad mood. Not like that. Or in a rude manner, in an insensitive manner, or over trivial matters. He condemned the attacking of others with the dissuading policy as being the approach not of a pracharaka, but a prataraka. So we are meant to be pracharakas, preachers, not pratarakas, cheaters. We are not supposed to simply attack others. We are supposed to explain many things. He explained on the basis of Shastra and philosophy why whatever he was criticizing was certainly criticizable and must be criticized. His systematic Shastriya, scriptural representation of the absolute truth was clearly far above both mere dogmatic censure and the slushy emotionalism associated with Bengali Vaishnavism. So it was not just dogmatically you're criticizing with the idea that we are right and it should be axiomatically understood that we are right and therefore not like that. You'll find that among certain preachers of certain religions, they talk as if it is obviously like that. Obviously. You don't belong to my religion? Oh, bad luck. Not like that. Bengali Vaishnavas have been well known for being hyper emotional in the past. They were like that. And that was something Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself opposed, and attracted many thoughtful followers whom he expected to assimilate on the strength of reasoned conviction, the asceticism, dedication, and unbreachable preaching spirit inherent to himself. So the preaching spirit that he had was something that he did not want. There is no question of subduing it. Saraswati Thakur never considered that he had accomplished enough and was entitled to retire comfortably. Prabhupada was like this also. Having declared unmitigating war on Maya, he established the paragon of a genuine preacher by fighting up to his last breath. Yet even while battling for Krishna, he ever remained a saint and gentleman. As a perfect Vaishnava, even in opposing others, he retained intrinsic respect for them and always spoke on principles, never descending to the platform of personal feuding, no personal quarrels. Thus, many who were initially startled by his forceful speaking were gradually won over by the cogency of his teachings. By the very reasonable nature of his teachings. His sincere concern for others has manifested in his unflinching adherence to truth and his other extraordinary godly qualities. The exemplar of Yukta Vairagya. 3. Yukta Vairagya. An Acharya who comes for the service of the Lord cannot be expected to conform to a stereotype, or he must find the ways and means by which Krishna consciousness may be spread. Now that's a quote. It's a quote from Prabhupada actually. Srila Rupa Goswami had distinguished Yukta Vairagya, balanced, discriminative renunciation in service to Krishna, from Phalgu Vairagya. Phalgu Vairagya in Bengali. Its feeble counterpart, feeble renunciation. Anasaktasya Vishayan, Yatharhopayun Jataha, Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe, Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. Not being attached to anything, yet properly using everything in relation to Krishna, is Yukta Vairagya. Renunciation suitable for bhakti. Prapanchika Taya Buddhya Harisambandhi Vastunaha. Mumukshubhir Parityago Vairagyam Phalgu Kathyate. Renunciation by persons desiring liberation of items related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Considering them material is called Phalgu, insignificant and worthless. In his writings, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had repeatedly stressed the importance of understanding and implementing Yukta Vairagya and progressive Bhakti. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati demonstrated this principle in an unprecedented manner, particularly in showing how the topmost level of spiritual consciousness is developed, not by disassociating oneself from the world, but by using everything in it to preach Shuddha Bhakti. Traditionally, renounced Vaishnavas had avoided thickly populated places, preferring to remain in secluded holy spots, especially Vrindavan and Navadvip, following the austere example of the 6 Goswamis who slept under a different tree every night. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's aim was to preach worldwide, for which Yukta Vairagya was the key. Thus, while uncompromising in principles, he was versatile in practice. He composed 2 Bengali verses describing Yukta and Phalgu Vairagya and featured them alongside Sri Rupa's originals on the header of each Gaudiya. Gaudiya was a weekly magazine. Asakti Rohit Sambandha Sahit Vishay Samoha Sapali Madhav. All sense objects which are used without personal attachment and in relation to Krishna are non-different from Krishna. They are all Madhava. Shri Hari Sevai Jaha Anukul Vishay Boliya Tyage Hoy Bhul. It is a mistake to reject anything suitable for serving Krishna, considering it an object of sense gratification. He reasoned, if everything is the Supreme Lord's energy, then why should anything be rejected? If God is good, then his energy also is good. Will not the master of unlimited universes accord some of his estate for the use of his servants? His genuine servants are they who understand that temporal items should not be used for sense enjoyment, but can and should be used solely for his service. Srila Saraswati Thakur desired to engage the entire world in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. But to effect that, the attention and respect of Westerners and the Western-minded would have to be won, for it was they who were shaping the world. Even in India, the Western secular paradigm was rapidly transforming attitudes towards life. Indian civilization had always been amenable to sadhus. They were listening to the sadhus, who, quite distinct from the rich and debonair, had deliberately lived simply and humbly, not coveting respect. So they're quite distinct from the rich people who are just sense enjoyers. They were completely different. But no longer was voluntary poverty widely esteemed, and modernistic sophisticates lumped in authentic saints with those beggars who posed as renunciants for the sake of eking out a living, for the sake of earning a living. Among the Bengali social elite, Vaishnavas in particular were now shunned as a motley, a group of rejects, illiterates, and lecturers. People who engage in illicit sexual activity. Considering that for the worldly minded to be benefited, they would first have to respect him and his representatives. Srila Saraswati Thakur donned elegant livery. Livery. The feeding, stabling, and care of horses for pay, a servant's uniform, a distinctive dress, rode in motor vehicles, lived in well-appointed apartments with ornate, decorated, Western-style furniture, invited socialites to hear Harikatha in gorgeously built temples, met with kings and invited governors and other high-ranking officials of the British Raj to preside over Gaudiya Math functions, all simply to gain the confidence of materialistic persons, to get them to give a hearing to and acknowledge its message. Everything of this world is meaningless if conceived of without relationship to Krishna. He explained, many make a drama of chanting 3 lakh names, yet merely a show of chanting without disturbing others will not benefit anyone except perhaps oneself. Therefore, we are preaching by approaching the people of the world dressed even somewhat better than they, showing knowledge even somewhat greater than theirs, and being even somewhat more stylish than they, without which they would think us worthless and not listen to our Harikatha. Therefore, I distinguish between strategy setting acharyas and strategy following acharyas. Those who are Nityasiddhas, who have come from the spiritual world, on the order of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they sometimes set strategies. And even if you become a perfect pure devotee, your business is to simply do what they say, not to create your own strategy. Strategy following acharyas. I have to go to various places for propagating Harikatha, so I must present myself as a learned and decent gentleman. Otherwise, non-devotees will not give me their time. Bhakti is not a blind process. To whatever frontiers of intelligence ordinary men can lift themselves, devotees must go further. Saraswati Thakur trusted that even if initially the admiration of worldlings was gained for the wrong reasons, if they heard from and observed how devotees lived in opulence but without attachment to it, for a sublime rather than sensual purpose, then gradually their esteem could develop into true spiritual appreciation. And although seeking respect was wholly against the principles of Lord Chaitanya, Srila Saraswati Thakur clarified that a devotee could accept honor not for personal aggrandizement, not so that he becomes great, but for offering to Krishna and creating reverence to him in individuals, otherwise wholly disinclined toward that. He declared, we can live among millions of rupees and bedecked in costly vesture, in a costly dress, if our intention is to serve Bhagavan. There is no difficulty on the path of devotional service. Devotees reject the pleasures of worldly enjoyers as being like excretion and urine. He compared Yukta Vairagya to the pragmatism of a snake, Ajagara Vritti. This is another quote. A snake does not build its own residence, but lives in a suitable place constructed by other creatures and thus spares itself the labor of constructing a house. Similarly, materialistic persons have taken unlimited pains to produce electric lights, conveyances, vehicles, mechanical fans, etc., and will continue in the future with such endeavors, which are useful for Vaishnavas. Being dedicated to the spiritual path, Vaishnavas do not think it necessary to strive for material comforts and are always absorbed in accepting the spiritual essence of everything. They do not consider the inconveniences of ancient times to be conducive for spiritual life, nor are they attached to living in opulent mansions constructed by others of today. Attainment of one's ultimate goal through the activities of the sensate world, of the world of our senses. Such as excessive remembrance and restoration of ancient things is not specified for the real spiritualists. It may be a bit of a surprise to some of us from India, but there are a number of people who are very much interested in how everything about India was 500 years back, 1,000 years back, 2,000 years back. I'm talking of among practicing devotees. I cannot even say, I can't use the word obsessed, but it's stronger than that. I cannot think of a word. It's just that. The plate has to be like that. The table has to be like that. The room has to be like that. The house has to be like that. It is just gorgeous for them. Everything has to be in the past. So what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was not promoting excessive flashback life, trying to live in the past. Of course, we know as time pushes us further and further towards Tamoguna, we are going to lose on the benefits of the past. We know that. But still, excessively hoping for that, it's too late. Satya Yuga is going to come a long time away. Before that, Kalki will come. Before that, the golden age will be over. All kinds of miseries, and we don't have to wait for Satya Yuga to come again. End of quote. Upon embracing the renounced order of life, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati seemingly renounced his extremely austere lifestyle to, in many ways, adopt that of a worldly gentleman. Yet there was no decrease in the spirit of selfless surrendered service to Krishna, which was the quiddity of his existence and of all that he preached. Which was the very essence of his existence. Rather, his apparently more comfortable mode of life demonstrated that he was not attached to abnegation, renunciation for its own sake, but was ready to live in whatever manner best facilitated his own Hariseva and that of others. This was according to Lord Chaitanya's principle of Krishna Pritya Bhogatya, acceptance or renunciation of items or activities based on Krishna's satisfaction. Krishna Pritya Bhogatya can mean to give up objects of enjoyment for the pleasure of Krishna. But it can also mean accepting or rejecting for the pleasure of Krishna. That's an excerpt from Chaitanya Charitamrita. But critics only saw that the Gaudiya Math possessed appurtenances associated with worldly enjoyment. Accessory objects associated with worldly enjoyment, and deeming them inappropriate for sadhus, failed to recognize the spirit of selfless devotion in which they were utilized, not considering the tremendous service being rendered through those facilities. Detractors, critics surmised, gave their opinion that the Gaudiya Math devotees were dandies in the guise of sadhus. These were people who gave exaggerated attention to personal appearance. Yet the assumption that the very idea that opulence was meant only for worldly enjoyment, and the inability to comprehend that a genuine devotee could live in luxury solely to utilize it for Krishna's pleasure, without even a speck of desire for selfish indulgence, revealed the critic's mindset as inferior and perverted. Saraswati Thakur detected that those who opposed devotees utilizing such amenities did so because they considered everything in existence as meant for their own sensual exploitation. He noted, atheists want the devotees to live in the forest while they stay at home and enjoy life. Many people ask, why is the Gaudiya Math temple so big? They think rather we should have a bigger brothel. We can drive cars, but devotees have no need for cars for serving Krishna. To the end of quote. It's a common challenge. What kind of sadhus are you with all these nice raiments, with all these nice garments, conveyances, vehicles, horses and elephants? The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his men would reply, the best things in the world should be employed in Krishna's service, no one else's, which means that they should be used exclusively by sadhus, for only sadhus use everything for Krishna. Although pragmatic, although practical, Saraswati Thakur was never a slave of pragmatism. He was not a slave of that, the ideology associated with that. He was the exemplar of Yukta Vairagya, non-imitative realistic renunciation of the world by persons with yet some work to do within it. Despite living amid plenty, he had no personal interest in comfort or finery or having some refined happiness, sensual happiness, and always remained abstemious. Marked by restraint, especially in the eating of food or drinking of alcohol, reflecting such restraint. Always remained restrained and disinclined to sense indulgence. Anasaktasya vishaya. Okay, now is a good time. Let me explain it the way I typically explain, using a combination matrix. Tolerate me. You just have to tolerate me. We are within a minute. Take for instance, there are different conditions here for Yukta Vairagya. One is Anasaktasya Vishaya. That's one. Then Anasaktasya Vishayan means that the person who is engaged in Yukta Vairagya should, the person who wants to utilize sense objects in the service of Krishna should not have any asakti or attachment towards the sense objects that he is utilizing for Krishna. Yatharham upayanjataha, and he should utilize them as much as they deserve to be utilized. To that extent, they should be utilized. Not more, not less. Then, nirbandha Krishna sambandhe, and when with determination you want to do that only in relationship to Krishna, that means only for Krishna's pleasure, when these three conditions are fulfilled, then it is Yukta Vairagya. If all these three conditions are not fulfilled, it is not Yukta Vairagya. So, there are 2 to the cube, you have 8 possibilities here. And only one is recognized as Yukta Vairagya. If I utilize all sense objects in Krishna's service, but without being personally attached to them, and I do so to the extent they need to be utilized, then it is Yukta Vairagya. Otherwise, it's not Yukta Vairagya. So this is acceptable. But nothing else is acceptable. If this condition is fulfilled, but this is not fulfilled and this is not fulfilled, it is not Yukta Vairagya. Similarly, here you have this and this fulfilled, but this is not fulfilled. The fourth type, you have the second and third not fulfilled. The fifth, the first condition is not fulfilled. The sixth, something is wrong. It should be like this. The first and third conditions are not fulfilled, or the first and third conditions are not fulfilled. All three conditions are not fulfilled. So Yukta Vairagya means this and only this. Otherwise, it's not Yukta Vairagya. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he demonstrated proper Yukta Vairagya because he pointed out that he himself was anasaktasya vishaya. He was the personification of that. Thus, he established that a devotee who desires not even a paisa for his own sensual indulgence could, for service to Krishna, spend crores of rupees and live in opulence. He explained how it was possible for devotees to accept all facilities, yet be totally renounced, and is far superior to slothful, quiescent living in the name of Nirjan Bhajan. How can it be superior to a quiet life in the name of Nirjan Bhajan? A lazy life. I understand, quote, I understand that a certain devotee has decided to construct a thatched cottage for the sake of improving his sadhana, thus placing obstacles to the propagation of Hari Kirtan in Madras. Okay, some background. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur started the preaching in Madras, today's Chennai. So one devotee wanted to do Nirjan Bhajan in Madras, there. So that he considered to be an obstacle for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's preaching of Krishna Bhakti. Even if he continues with such activities of sense enjoyment, for many lifetimes, Hari Kirtan will simply go on without cessation. But it is improper that anyone's inclination to serve the Lord and his devotees be attenuated, even up to the last breath. So we should ensure that we should not lessen anyone's inclination to serve Krishna and Krishna's devotees. I'm not in favor of building a thatched cottage within the city as a residence for sannyasis. For that purpose, a Himalayan cave would be better, or one could do bhajan by becoming a tree like Yamalarjuna. Hari Kirtan is the only necessity in this valuable human life. It is not required to place stumbling blocks to preaching by citing Nirjan Bhajan as an excuse for inactive life or accepting meaningless poverty on the plea of renunciation, rather than hiding in a cottage with the intention of hidden sense enjoyment, thus preparing for stationary existence, plant life, birth after birth. Better to immediately begin performing every endeavor for Krishna's pleasure. One can attain Hari Bhajan and the mercy of Mahaprabhu by attempting to reveal and preach the glories of Guru and Gauranga, while internally cultivating the Vairagya described in Prarthana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika, and by mentally accepting that from such utterances as Shadras Bhojan Dure Tori Hari, Pavevraje Magiya Khaibo Madhu Kari. When will I completely renounce the 6 varieties of sapor, 6 varieties of taste, edible taste, and live in Vraj by begging food? So in other words, these could be accepted mentally, meaning that first you cultivate it in the form of a desire, genuine desire. Because if you seriously desire, Radharani will actually put you in a situation where you won't get good food and you'll have to go around begging for food. With this attitude, it is possible to ride dressed as a sannyasi through North Gopalapuram in the limousine of the Madras Gaudiya Mutt without being a pretender or hypocrite. There is no need to follow the example of a certain person of Kulia Pulia is today's Navadip town, who falsely dresses as a Babaji and makes a show of renunciation while engaging in, what is this word? Cyberitism, right? Sensualism, while engaging in sensual activities, sinful activities. Renunciation is a matter of the heart. There's a vast difference between those who misuse the trappings of renunciation and they who follow in the footsteps of Janaka Maharaj or Ramananda Rai. Janaka Maharaj. In Mahabharata, the glory of the Janaka lineage comes out. Lord Krishna also mentions it in Bhagavad Gita. There's a statement of Janaka Maharaj quoted by the Vaishnavas. Even though I possess the entirety of Mithila, I don't consider it to be mine because it actually belongs to the Supreme Soul, Lord Narayan. Ramananda Rai is another example. He was a Vidvat sannyasi. He was enlightened sannyasi living in the disguise of a householder. But internal renunciation or Yukta Vairagya does not mean becoming a Ravana while externally imitating Janak Maharaj or Ramananda Rai or misusing their example. On one hand, we have Yukta Vairagya. On the other hand, we have Gita Samsara. We all know that story of the person who entered into family life, all for the sake of Bhagavad Gita. So that is one extreme, Gita Samsara. And on this hand, you have Phalgu Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya comes right in the middle. You may make an artificial show of renunciation in this way, but never expect it to produce any positive results. End of quote. Srila Saraswati Thakur's two major gurus had spoken the same truths, but Srila Gauranga Das Babaji Maharaj's teachings had not been taken seriously. His rigid stance having been discounted by almost all hearers as transcendental idiosyncrasy. And although Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's preaching had made considerable impact in Bengal, it had also been largely neglected even by many who verbally admired him. Srila Saraswati Thakur was determined that his own directive not be disregarded, and hence by combining spiritual integrity with material competence and sophistication, he presented himself and his mission in a manner that could not but command respect both from worldly and spiritually minded persons. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati practiced Yukta Vairagya by doing whatever was necessary for serving Krishna, especially by using a show of opulence to attract the public to Shuddha Bhakti. He explained that destitution, poverty, in and of itself could neither satisfy Krishna nor fulfill his mission. At an assemblage, in an assembly of his disciples in Mayapur, prior to dispatching them to different parts of India, he instructed them to travel by car or horse and stay in capacious buildings. Large buildings. Don't scrimp. Don't be stingy or go in a poor or lowly manner. Keep a high standard. Spend for preaching and make an impression. He wanted his representatives to keep visiting cards and that their clothes, this was 100 years back, visiting card, and that their clothes be neat, clean, and presentable, not shabby and unkempt, like those typical of many sadhus. As in his typical complex style, he advised his preachers in London, the esoteric representation need not be placed on the table at the sacrifice of the exoteric code and exposition. Just as the people are found to be very hasty to judge a person by his external appearance. So don't what you keep within your heart, keep it within your heart. If you expose it to people who are incapable of valuing it, then we should not do that. Another concession for the modern world and point to criticize for ritual purists, for people who wanted everything to be ritualistically pure, was the Gaudiya Math devotees wearing of overcoats and tailored shirts, notwithstanding Shastriya scriptural prohibitions against sewn cloth due to its being considered impure. The Gaudiya Math owned 4 cars, which were stationed in Calcutta and Mayapur, and used by devotees most expert in collection, by sannyasis for larger preaching programs and for personal service to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. The mutt also had a horse and a buggy, an elephant and a camel. Buggy is a carriage, horse carriage. The camel was purchased after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati saw one in Patna and said that such a creature should be engaged in Mahaprabhu's service. During festivals and parikramas of the holy dhams, decorated horses and elephants added to the pomp. The Gaudiya Math horses were so strong and sleek that in Bagvasar it was rumored that they were fed malpuya. After opening the showcase temple on the bank of the Ganga in Calcutta, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would treat prominent people to excursions on the Ganga in one of the Gaudiya Math's launches. He had a launch. And in that pleasant environment would expound Harikatha to them. When the governor of Bengal, Sir John Anderson, visited Mayapur, arrangements for receiving him and his gubernatorial party relating to a governor were made by a Calcutta hotel. Arrangements for receiving him and his associates were made by a Calcutta hotel, which on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's order supplied meat and other items according to British taste. When Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati suggested a similar approach for foreign preaching, Srimad B.R. Sridhar Maharaj protested that it would invite criticism. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, I decided all these things thousands of births ago. We have to do anything and everything for serving Mahaprabhu. On another occasion, he had cigarettes provided for a visiting German scholar. Srila Saraswati Thakur was sometimes criticized as overstepping Srila Rupa Goswami's prohibition of Maharambha, ventures requiring intense endeavor, like establishing a costly temple. While explaining to his disciples the section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu wherein this injunction lay, Srila Saraswati Thakur justified his position. It is a question of personal ability. One man might manage an empire and still find time for leisure, whereas another, despite laboring without respite, without any relaxation, without any rest, can barely maintain his family. In other words, whether an undertaking is considered great or small depends on the capacity of the individual. Whereas traditional sadhus shunned modern mechanized contrivances as being the perquisites of Maya, as being the privileges, gains, or profits, and so on, of Maya. It's just Maya Devi throwing something to attract you. The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati displayed a higher understanding, seeing in them an opportunity to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya in an unprecedented manner. Expertly employing products of Maya in Krishna service, he utilized printing presses, trains, cars, and other technological marvels, despite the radio being anathema to old school sadhus. The radio was Maya at that time. Now, YouTube is Maya, or things worse than YouTube is Maya. In June 1935, Sundarananda Vidya Vinod Prabhu first put Harikatha on the airwaves from the only radio station in India, in Calcutta, and later transmitted information regarding the festivals Janmashtami, Nandotsava, Radhashtami, and the Avirbhav Mahotsava of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Once prior to an aired lecture, some of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's disciples broadcast kirtan, accompanied by traditional instruments and a piano. Magic lanterns, crude slideshows were another modern innovation that were a big attraction. Srila Saraswati Thakur upheld Yukta Vairagya as not merely an expedient for a materially progressive age, but the balanced middle path between the maddened enjoying spirit of gross materialism and the extreme negativity of Mayavad. He stated, by causing awareness of Phalgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya to descend into this world, Sri Gauranga completely nullified the impulsiveness of various unthinking individuals' Mayavad, propensity for material enjoyment, and so on. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati often quoted Srimad Bhagavatam 11.22, 7 to 8. 11.20.7 to 8. That persons excessively inclined to material enjoyment tend toward karma, and those disgusted by mundane pleasures are inclined to jnana, whereas persons who by good fortune have developed faith in hearing and chanting about Krishna, being neither revulsed, they are not repulsed by, nor overly attached to material life, would achieve perfection through the path of bhakti. Bhakti yogosya siddhidaha. He also pointed out that the vision underpinning, foundational to Yukta Vairagya was not merely pragmatic, but essential, for without seeing everything in relation to Bhagavan, one could not attain prema, the love for him that is a requirement of every jiva, and that devotees must engage everything in Krishna's service. Failure to thus utilize any item means to employ it for personal enjoyment. Nevertheless, recognizing the risk in offering opulence to persons not wholly free from selfish desires, Srila Saraswati Thakur warned his disciples that while engaging money, women, and prestige in Hari Seva, they not become entrapped in the deceitfulness of subtle enjoyment, and thus, while ostensibly performing Hari Seva, actually become inimical to it. So, when it comes to Yukta Vairagya, let us always remember, the first condition is anasaktasya vishaya. The second condition is yathartha-upayanjata. Third condition is we utilize it in Krishna's service. So we cannot be attached to what we consider to be utilizable in Krishna's service, and on top of it, it has to be utilized as much as it deserves to be utilized. That's also the consideration of how much we need to utilize it. That is the place where I wrote about this. Yeah, I wrote about this. Okay, there is a 5-page note which I have written about it with quotes from Prabhupada. I'll just read out. I'm sorry. I will upload this in the Telegram group for those who are interested. I'll just quote from Prabhupada. I won't read out everything. Our policy, this is about anasaktasya vishaya. Our policy is that we are using this microphone. It is not that if there is no microphone, we shall stop our speaking or preaching work. No. We have no attraction for this microphone. But when there is microphone, we take advantage of it for spreading Krishna consciousness. That is the formula given by Rupa Goswami. So, if I'm dependent on a microphone for doing the preaching work or speaking work, that means I am asaktasya vishaya. I am not anasaktasya vishaya. So, anasaktasya vishaya means that we don't become dependent on what we are utilizing in Krishna's service. Yatharham. Yukta Vairagya means that we should simply accept the bare necessities of our material part of life and try to save time for spiritual advancement appropriately, as much as required. Not more than that. Not in such a manner that we become aroused in sense enjoyment. Krishna Sambandhe. The Madan Mohan temple was constructed by a big merchant. He approached Sanatana Goswami. Sir, what can I do for you? I want to serve you. So Sanatana Goswami said, I'm living underneath the tree and my Madan Mohan is hanging. So if you can construct a temple for Madan Mohan. Similarly, Maharaj Man Singh approached Rupa Goswami to serve him and was instructed to construct a temple for Govindaji. They never constructed a big temple for their own living purpose, but only for Krishna's purpose. That is the way. For Krishna, we must have everything very gorgeous and first class, but not for me. Personally, we should not possess anything, simply for Krishna. So if you look at this example of the Madan Mohan temple or Govindaji temple, and Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, even after these temples were built, Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami continued to live under trees. They did not say, okay, one room, just keep it for me in the temple. They could easily have done it. No, all for Krishna and none for me. Not all for Krishna and all for me, or all for Krishna and some for me. All for Krishna and none for me. Should I make a combination matrix of that? No, I will not make, but you can understand the point. Okay. Okay. The Sikh Goswamis conquered over eating, sleeping, mating. There was no question. They were sannyasis in the renounced order of life. And defense also, there was no question, because they depended on Krishna, the most powerful defender. So there was no question of defense. Simply two things: eating and sleeping. And that they also conquered. If you're embarrassed with these four things, ahar, nidra, bhayamaituramcha, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, then we are not making progress in spiritual life. It should be reduced, just like Raghunath Das Goswami did. All the Goswamis, they had no business. But that is very difficult. If one has to imitate the behavior of Rupa Goswami and all the Goswamis, it is very difficult. Therefore, Yukta Vairagya. Also, Prabhupada said that, my Guru Maharaj used to say, the best use of a bad bargain, everything in Krishna relationship, that is Yukta Vairagya. So it's the best use of a bad bargain. I will post this separately. All right. Any questions? One minute. Leela Madhuri Lalita Mataji. First of all, I need to make some.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Could you please explain the last sentence which Guru Maharaj said? Best use of bad bargain.
Prabhupada's spiritual master used to say, Yukta Vairagya is the best use of a bad bargain. We are in material existence. So let us utilize things as they deserve to be utilized in Krishna's service. I'll send that document, you can read it. I'll put it in the Telegram group.
Okay. Can I ask one more question? You made a list of things that after telling about Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, of course they have overcome everything, including eating and sleeping, but I'm not in that stage. So is it everything
Therefore,
for Krishna, none
Vairagya,
for me?
please, see, if we don't follow Yukta Vairagya, we can't even maintain good health, So therefore,
I didn't get it. I'm sorry. I didn't get it.
when we progress in Krishna consciousness, we develop something called Bhava Virakti. When one progresses in pure devotion service in sadhana bhakti towards Bhava Bhakti, then you develop a natural disinclination, both externally and internally, towards sense objects. And that explains why Prabhupada keeps saying quite often that when you progress in Krishna consciousness, your hankering for eating, sleeping, mating, defending will reduce. That also explains how the Goswamis could be like that. They were in Prema Bhakti, far beyond Bhava Bhakti even. So that kind of renunciation is called Bhavottha Virakti. Bhava Uttha Virakti. Since we don't have that, no matter how much we try to imitate, it will not work. Because if the mind is attracted to different things for eating and all that, then continuously will fall back into all this. So instead of artificially trying to do that which is impossible prior to being blessed by Bhava Bhakti, the best thing that we can do is to accept Yukta Vairagya as taught by Krishna's own representatives of the status of the stature of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada, and so on. So at our level, we accept whatever we are meant, whatever we are allowed to accept within within our status. We all have a status. In particular, in Varnashrama Dharma, everyone has a particular set of prescriptions, prohibitions, and allowances. And even in practicing Krishna consciousness, we have certain allowances. So we function within those allowances according to our material and spiritual duties. All of this will be clarified by our spiritual masters, our spiritual authorities who know us well and who help us make spiritual progress, with reference to the teachings of the Acharyas and Shastra. That's how we understand what is appropriate for me, what is not appropriate for me. One man's food is another man's poison. Even in school, the children who go for primary school, they're often allowed to play a lot. That is by design. The school is designed like that. But in higher stages, they're expected to be more self-controlled. Similarly, as you progress more and more and more, you're expected to be more and more reserved. So like that, corresponding to our abilities, our spiritual masters and other caretakers, they will give us particular instructions. It's a science. Okay, Bankim Govinda.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu.
No.
Prabhu, the service, the mood of service, will that also come under the Vairagya, under the definition or under the purview? Like, for example, the service, for example, if I'm into singing, I'm attached, and if devotees are kind of appreciating me for singing, but I'm attached to that. I derive some pleasure out of it when they. So how is that considered, Prabhu?
See, deriving pleasure out of something which is pleasing
I'm sure
to.
if you look, you'll find the way you think is.
Deriving pleasure from something which is pleasing to Hari Guru Vaishnavas is not necessarily being attached to it, but being attached to. That's why you look at that example of the microphone. Now, if I say, if you don't give me a microphone, I will not speak about Krishna consciousness. I will not spread Krishna consciousness. That is me. That means I'm now attached to it. That is a sort of attachment that is prohibited by Rupa Goswami. So suppose I say that I will sing only if devotees glorify me. Now that is certainly being attached to it. Or if I were to say, only I will sing and no one else should sing, because it is for Krishna's pleasure. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe. So then you'll have to consider that also. Also, it may be going beyond the limit. Anasaktasya Vishyan Yatharham Upayunjataha. You have to utilize it as it deserves to be utilized. What if there is a singer who's better than me today, somehow, in the temple hall? Or what if someone's may not be as good in singing, but we know that he's pure or purer than me, and by hearing his singing, my desire to please Hari Guru Vaishnavas will increase. And that may happen for others also. So when we mature in Krishna consciousness, these kind of thoughts come into our heads naturally, not artificially. Naturally, we start thinking along these lines. It is my own experience I have seen that when we try to increase the quality and quantity of chanting, when we start thinking about this, chanting is not just some daily duty. It is a process. It is a process by which we make spiritual progress, and everything else is basically connected to that. This is the central item, and everything else is connected to that. When after some time, when we are blessed by devotees attached to Krishna's holy names, when we are blessed by them, we understand this. Then we little bit wake up. Oh, this is the process. So long I wasted my time in pressing buttons which are weak. Let me press this one button which is more effective. So then we begin to learn, what is actually pleasing to Krishna, what is displeasing to Krishna. So gradually we begin to understand that there are several aspects of surrender to Krishna. If I do all these things, then Krishna reciprocates in particular manner. We begin to understand, Krishna consciousness, what actually Krishna wants from me. Each of us, we begin to understand this. So then these things naturally come to our mind. It's a natural process. It's not artificial.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Prasnabhyascha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.